tell everyone your name.
My name is Sean Walton, and my son. I'm here to talk about my son Craig, who died in 1994. He was born on the 17th of December. I'll show you a picture of Craig first before I go any further.
Come here. That baby. He's 5 months there, yeah?
Yeah, he was born on the 17th of December 1994. The birth was quite difficult. They were telling my wife to push when she wasn't fully dilated, but he recovered okay from the trauma of birth, and he was a perfectly healthy baby, and he developed normally for 5 months. At the time we had all the recommended vaccines. We knew no better at the time, we believed the doctor's advice, the government advice, the school advice, etc. The things that you'd read in the media about vaccines and how wonderful they were. And he had the usual vaccines. He also had 3 DPT vaccines, and I think it was 3 months, 4 months, and 5 months. And the 3rd DPT vaccine, which is diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, he had on the 16th of May 1995, and we think that is the one that probably killed him, or at least contributed to his death. 2 days later, bear in mind he's 5 months old now. 2 days after the DPT vaccine, 2.5 days, sorry, he was found dead in his cot. This was on the 19th of May. My wife had phoned me at work that morning. I worked a few miles away. She'd phoned me at work that morning, and I'd gone home for lunch, and because she said my son had been crying and he was quite distressed. Well, when I was at home, he wasn't actually that bad. So in fact, he gave me the biggest smile I'd ever got from him that day. Or I thought it was a smile, but knowing what happened subsequently, I've probably changed my mind, and it may have been a grimace of discomfort or maybe pain. I don't know. I went home anyway. I went back to work thinking that he was probably okay. Obviously, then she had a few more problems in the afternoon with him, crying and very distressed. She phoned I lived in the UK at the time, as I mentioned. She phoned the National Health Service helpline. They advised to put him in the cot to see if she could get him to calm down and go to sleep. In retrospect, it probably wasn't the best advice. Maybe they didn't realise the gravity of the situation. But he was due an afternoon nap anyway. He hadn't had his afternoon nap, so she tried to get him into the cot and to relax and to get him to go to sleep. She left the room for a while, and then she thought to herself, maybe it's a little bit too quiet. So she went back to check this. I think it was about 25 minutes later, she said, and she found him dead in the cot. Well, he was blue and not breathing, so as far as we're concerned now, we think he was probably dead at that point. Obviously, she called an ambulance. She also went to a neighbour to see if she could get any help from a neighbour. She tried to contact me at work, but this was before the time of mobile phones as well. I'd actually left work by this time, and I think I'd probably gone to visit a friend on the way home from work. And before the time of mobile phones, she couldn't contact me, so she had to deal with it herself. Fortunately, the neighbour was quite a big help. He tried to resuscitate my son Craig with mouth-to-mouth and CPR, but it didn't work. And by this time, the ambulance arrived, and the paramedics couldn't revive him either. So they injected him in the heart with adrenaline, which is the usual practice, if you can't revive somebody. And his heart actually did start beating again. Now, we believe he was dead at this time. It was just, like I say, they managed to get his heart beating again. So he was taken to hospital and put on life support. In the meantime, I came home to an empty house and eventually got to the hospital. He was on life support for 4 days. And I mean, that's probably one of the most awful scenes that anybody could ever go through, to see their own baby son, with tubes, to breathing tubes and wired up to life support machines. After, I think it was probably about the 3rd day, the paediatrician came to us and said that he thought my son was brain dead and that there was no hope of recovery. So it was I think it's a decision that nobody should have to make. He also asked if we could donate the organs, and it's a very difficult decision to make, and obviously was psychologically traumatised. But we made that decision to have the life support turned off, and his liver was actually donated to a girl in Sweden, and so at least something positive came of his death. That a girl got a life back because my son died. At the time, I had my suspicions about the vaccine link, so I asked the paediatrician if he thought there was a vaccine link. This is a Dr. Daesh, I think his name was. Let's say this is back in 1995. He said that he didn't see any link. And I think he said that in good faith. I think he probably genuinely did believe that. It was before there wasn't as much access to information that many years back. So yeah, my son was dead following a DPT vaccine. I've got to just do a little aside here. Is that okay to do a little aside, which is sort of partly, I'll get back. It's only going to take 5 minutes because it is quite relevant. Despite all the trauma we'd been through, my wife actually became pregnant again approximately 3 to 4 weeks after the death. Even though, I mean, the death in the family, a sudden infant death, is almost like, if you can imagine your life being a calm pond, it's like somebody throwing a brick into that pond and the ripples reverberate through the time of your life as it reaches the edge. It has a lot of consequences. And affects your life quite severely, as you can probably imagine. And we believe that like I say, she was 3 months after she became pregnant. This was now September, 4 or 5 months after the death. I may have got the timing slightly wrong on that. But anyway, she had a brain hemorrhage. I found her at home, hardly breathing, and a weak pulse. And she'd collapsed, and she had a brain hemorrhage, and we believe that this is probably one of the consequences of the death. Well, obviously I can't prove this, but we think it was probably the stress of the death and having 3 pregnancies in succession as well, which must have took a lot out of her body, that contributed to this hemorrhage. She went through a hell of a time. She had to go to have brain surgery at the Oxford Radcliffe Infirmary in the UK. She was in hospital for quite a few months. She had to learn to walk and talk again, and she did an amazing job. I think it was only because she was in her mid-20s that she managed to recover. I think if she'd have been quite a bit older, that she would have had difficulty recovering from that. Although she's still got a few issues and a few minor disabilities, but at least she can walk and she can talk,
Horrific time for you at that point.
I was in a right mess, to be honest. I didn't really take it. I wasn't the help that I could have been, But I mean, I thank the surgeons who did the operation on my wife. Like I say, she was pregnant with my second son, so they actually saved 2 lives in one. And my unborn son, second son, did an amazing job by getting through that. My wife was pumped full of drugs, obviously, painkillers, antibiotics, etc. During the pregnancy. So my second son, Gary, was born in March of 1996. We had doubts, but believed all the government propaganda, the doctor, etc. Why would they not be telling us the truth? We had no reason to doubt that they acted in good faith. We believed all the what we were told about vaccines, that they were safe. And like I said, I had my doubts. Sorry, I'm repeating myself there.
That's okay. That's okay.
But we had Gary vaccinated anyway.
With
throughout.
the same DPT.
Andy had the DPT vaccine as well, yeah. Even though I had my suspicions, I kind of believed that all that I was told by the doctor, the media tell you. There was no computers at the time, so you can't really do. Well, I couldn't do my own research because bear in mind this was the early 1990s or mid 1990s. Anyway, Gary was born. He was reasonably healthy considering he'd survived during my wife's illness. He had very difficult socialisation as he was growing up. We thought it was probably, he was just a bit shy, well, extremely shy. He developed some sort of odd interests. He got in a bit of trouble at school. And he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at age 16. And, I always wonder, it could have been possibly, I know that there's a lot of evidence to link drugs in pregnancy, not illicit drugs, but big pharmaceutical medication in pregnancy. Some doctors have linked that to later developmental problems in later life for children. So whether it was the drugs in pregnancy and the trauma that my second son must have went through in pregnancy, or whether it was the vaccinations that I was foolish enough to allow him to have. Anyway, he has an autistic disorder. And now I'll go back to the main thrust of the story, which is my son Craig, who died. And I'll jump from 14 years from his death to the 2009. This is the 2009 swine flu epidemic. By this time I had a computer, so I was able to do a bit of research, and there are a few discrepancies in the mainstream media story about the flu vaccine and the flu outbreak. The one that sort of sticks in my mind mainly is the fact that they developed a vaccine so soon after the major outbreak, and it struck me as a little bit odd. At the very least, it wasn't properly tested. Within a matter of months, this vaccine was ready for the swine flu, and it just couldn't have been possibly tested properly. And with that bit of research, it led me on to further research about vaccines. I read a few books. I went to a few lectures. Further research about my son's DPT vaccine, particularly. Then I read one of the things that really opened my eyes was Dr. Vieira Scheibner's PhD piece, which is adverse effects of adjuvants in vaccines. This is not really relevant to show you this. But anyway, it was mainly about the adjuvants in vaccines, aluminium, all these, there's quite a lot, there's probably about 50 or 200, there's a lot of adjuvants, a lot of toxins are added to vaccines, allegedly to stimulate your body to produce antibodies to the pathogen that goes in with the adjuvants. But in Vieira Scheibner's PhD piece, she also, and this is available on the internet, you don't have to pay for it or buy it. This is Adverse Effects of Adjuvants in Vaccines by Dr. Vieira Scheibner. She also mentions about the pertussis element of the DPT vaccine causes brain swelling and sudden infant deaths. Well, as I'll mention later, both of these conditions are actually mentioned on my son's death certificate. This is not really that relevant. The bit highlighted in green.
Just bring it a little bit closer.
It's just tells you about that's just to prove that it's written in there, really. Mm-hmm. And a practice for you to get the document in the right place. Then the other thing that sort of struck me, one of the other things I can remember that I researched at the time was the Japanese were giving children DPT vaccine in the 1970s, and they realised that it was causing sudden infant deaths. So they started the vaccinating at 3 months. They was getting a lot of infant deaths, and they then deferred the vaccination schedule to 2 years, and there was an 85 to 90% reduction in the severe cases of damage, adverse reactions and death. And I'll read this bit. This is from Raymond, I can't even pronounce his name, Obomsawin, MD. and this is a quote from him, "Delay of DPT immunisation until 2 years of age in Japan has resulted in a dramatic decline in adverse side effects. In the period of 1970 to 1974, when DPT vaccine was begun at 3 to 5 months of age, the Japanese National Compensation System paid out claims for 57 permanent severe damage vaccine cases, and 37 deaths. Well, I never received any compensation for my son. Not that would have brought him back, obviously. So at least the Japanese had the good sense to recognise that there was a problem there, and that the DPT vaccine is heavily implicated in sudden infant deaths. And Raymond Bomsawin, MD, he goes on to say, during the ensuing 6-year period, 1975 to 1980, when DPT injections were delayed to 24 months of age, severe reactions from the vaccine were reduced to a total of 8, with 3 deaths. This represents an 85 to 90% reduction in severe cases of damage or death. And this information is widely available on the internet. And I do think to myself, well, if the Japanese government knew about this, that the DPT vaccine was causing sudden infant deaths, then surely that information was available to the British government as early as the 1970s and a lot of other countries in the Western world. So why did so many countries in the Western world continue giving children DPT vaccines knowing that it was killing children? Something I probably won't ever get the answer to. Yeah, like I was saying, 14 years later, and I've done all this research, and although I knew in my mind and my heart that my son had been vaccinated 2.5 days before he died, I sort of had doubts after 14 years. I just thought, well, maybe I've got the time scale wrong. So I thought, just to sort of kind of clarify it in my own mind, I'll do a bit more digging. And in the UK, all children, they used to be presented with a red book. All the parents of children used to be presented with a little red book, which used to contain the vaccination schedule signed off by a health nurse to say which vaccines I'd had. So I thought, well, I'll look for that. And with the passing of time, I'd forgotten where I put it, and I couldn't find it anywhere. We'd moved house as well, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I had no evidence that my son had been vaccinated 2.5 days before his death. So I thought, well, I'll contact the GP practice where he used to go and ask them for the vaccination records. And I did that. And I'll read this letter. This is the letter I got back from the GP practice where my son used to be a patient.
The people that vaccinated your child, basically.
That's it, yeah, the people that vaccinated my child. They say, unfortunately, we don't have any access to your son's records. Once a patient leaves the doctor's list, whether they've moved away, passed on or emigrated, the medical records are returned to the primary care trust, who retain them for 10 years. Then it goes on to say, records of childhood immunisations are normally held by the Child Services Department at the General Hospital. So they're held locally by the local health authority. I believe that these records are held for 20 years and therefore they may be able to provide you with some information. So then I wrote to the local health authority asking if they had the vaccination records, and they said, for your information, deceased records are normally retained for a period of 8 years and they're thereafter destroyed. However, I'm glad to inform you that we still have access to these medical records, and I had to pay £40 to get the medical records, and then it also they treated the immunisation details as a separate issue, saying that the hospital holds the records, or the local authority. So that's quite an important point to remember. So just remember that, anybody who's listening. So then, like I said, I wrote to the local authority. They say, further to your request, I note that you also require immunisation details. I've contacted Child Services on your behalf, and they've supplied me with an electronic printout of the immunisation history, including the batch numbers. And then there's this, and I've highlighted in green the two. Was very bizarre. They only sent me details of 2 immunisations. One in I think it was March, and one in April.
No.
Well, the one that he had 2.5 days before his death in May, that wasn't listed on there. Further leading me to believe that maybe my memory had misled me in some way, that maybe I was losing the plot on that. But I still, you know, in the back of my mind, I knew that I was right, because I don't normally make mistakes on times and dates and things like that. So I kept digging for information anyway. I wrote a few emails, made a few phone calls, and then I got this email from the hospital records department, the local authority, health authority. It says, "Dear Mr. Walton, further to your telephone inquiry, I've liaised with our child services department, have confirmed that there were only 2 vaccines recorded, and a report has already been provided," which I've just shown you. "If you have any further queries relating to vaccines, it will be necessary for you to contact your GP to confirm whether your son attended for any further vaccinations." Well, the GP's office told me and wrote me a letter saying they don't hold the details. So now, and asked me to go to the local authority, the local health authority. So now I've got an email saying from the local health authority telling me that I need to go to the GP practice. So obviously there's a big contradiction there. And a bit more time passed, and by chance, like I say, we'd moved house, and I was looking through some old photographs, and I actually found the red vaccination schedule that had been given to us by the GP practice, although 14 years earlier, or nearly 15 years earlier.
You mean you found the red book?
I found the red book, yeah. And I think, you know, thank God, you know, I'm not going mad after all, and it was great relief that at least I knew that I was right about this. And there it is. It's listed on there. The 3 vaccines and the.
So they lied. They barefaced lied.
They lied, yeah.
That is disgusting.
As I said, the last vaccine was 2.5 days before he died. Although I will mention now, the death certificate mentions it as 5 days after, but we consider that he actually died on the time that my wife found him in his cot. Because.
How dare they lie?
So.
I'm so glad you found the red book.
Yeah. So then I sent another email to let them know that I'd found the red book. And they emailed back saying, "Thank you for your email. I'll need to discuss the vaccination matter further with my manager, who is currently on leave." So how convenient, the manager's on leave, you know. she wasn't confident enough to make that decision herself, maybe. So I won't show you that one. And then it took, I think it was over another month before they actually wrote back again. And I got this letter. It says, "Further to your telephone conversation with our health records manager, I've enclosed a printout supplied by the GP surgery confirming that the 3rd immunisation did take place on the 16th of May 1995, which is, like I say, 2.5 days before my son's death. Please accept our apologies that it has taken so long to find out this information for you." I'm not sure whether I do accept their apology, because to get that bit of information it took me over a year. And like you say, they lied, or it looks like they may have lied.
Well, come on, they so lied.
Yeah.
I mean, they left the DPT out that killed your child.
Yeah, I mean, it's hardly unlikely to be an accident, is it?
No.
You see, the reason they left it out is because I'd already informed them that I was a bit doubtful in my own mind about whether he had, you know, that I was right on the timing of it. So I think they must have thought, oh, he's got a few doubts in his mind, therefore we'll be able to get away with this, you know. And then I've got the information that they finally sent with it that actually does, from the hospital records department, that does show all 3 DPT vaccines listed. That's that one.
So
there.
they
sent me almost the
they
same
corrected
document.
their mistake.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good to hear. So you had Hib as well.
Yeah, there was Hib and polio that he had with the DPT vaccine, but like I say, with the research I've done, it's the actual pertussis element of the DPT vaccine that's usually implicated in sudden infant deaths and brain swelling. And then I've got the death certificate, which it says cerebral anoxia and sudden infant death syndrome. Well, cerebral anoxia is brain swelling caused by lack of oxygen, but as I said, brain swelling is also caused by or can be caused by the pertussis element of the DPT vaccine, and as Dr. Vieira Scheibner says, and many other doctors, is implicated in a lot of sudden infant deaths. And apart from the picture that I first shown you and one other picture, we've not really got many memories of our son. I suppose my message really to any parent would be to do your own research. You know, like I say, when this happened to my son, it was difficult. I had no idea with computers. I didn't have a computer, and the information wasn't out there. But the information's out there now. There's hundreds of books you can buy. There's so much information on the internet. Like I say, you can go to a few lectures like I did. All that information's out there, and I just urge any parent, before you take the advice, the big pharmaceutical propaganda, the advice of the GP, the advice of the nurse, you know, they believe what they say, maybe they're doing it in good faith. Do the research, spend a few hours, a few days doing a bit of research and to make an informed choice, rather than just believing what you read in the newspaper or what the government propaganda on vaccines. Another interesting point here is that people should realise, at least in the UK and Ireland, that GP practices do actually get a financial incentive to meet vaccination targets. So why, you know, that's probably another good reason that they're so pro-vaccine. That's just a little aside.
It's the same in the US as well.
Yeah, that's the end of the story regarding Craig, but I've just got one more thing to say. I had a third son who was born in 2012. I nearly forgot his birthday. He's now 5, well he's almost 5, he's 5 in July, and he's perfectly healthy. He's a really fit and able young lad, intelligent. He's had a couple of childhood diseases, no problems whatsoever. He actually had homeoprophylaxis, which is a homeopathic based alternate, sort of a semi-alternative to vaccines that kind of educates the body to cope with any diseases that they might get. And that was a local homeopath that did that. Like I say, he's perfectly fit and healthy, no problems whatsoever. And that's the end of my story of Craig's life and death, his brief life and death. And thanks for listening.
It's tragic, and we're going to take this picture of Craig. Now, are you sure you can spare this?
Yeah, I've got some other pictures, some other copies, so yeah, you could take that.
We're going to take Craig, and we're going to go and pin him on that RV bus.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, thank you.
He'll be with all the other babies in there, in good company. Now, so your last son, 5 years old, he's no vaccines whatsoever?
He's had no vaccines whatsoever, no.
Not even the vitamin K?
Oh, they, at the hospital they tried to kind of bully us, or we felt a bit bullied into having vitamin K. And we did actually consent for him to have it orally, I think. So he had it orally, but not injected.
And he's had absolutely no vaccines on that.
He's had no vaccines, and he's perfectly fit and healthy, yeah.
Well, what a tragic vaccinated versus unvaccinated story in your house.
Yeah, I mean, it does highlight the potential difference there between a vaccinated and an unvaccinated child, yeah.